You're looking at an abstract for a scientific paper, which I found in one of the pedagogical scientific magazines. It's a Russian magazine, and the requirements for authors are that their papers need to be submitted in both Russian and English. An abstract for each paper must be in both languages. The purpose of this video is to show you that translation method doesn't do your ideas justice. Authors translate their abstracts and their papers to English because they want to conform to the publication rules. However, their ideas unfortunately get lost, and it's very difficult for somebody whose first language is English to understand the idea delivered in this abstract and to see the value of the scientific research. Unfortunately, the writing standards are still quite poor, and even though we have great ideas, we also need to raise the bar for these writing competences so that we're able to communicate our great ideas with the international world. Let me show you what exactly feels off in this article and how this abstract can be fixed. And why I even paid attention to this, because as soon as I opened this, I saw these things immediately. In this article, there must be a comma here. In this article, comma, we present, look at this. This is a grammatical error. Unfortunately, in the first sentence, we present speech etiquette as a category of the relationship between language and culture. I understand this concept, relationship between language and culture. But I don't understand this. Is there such a thing as a category? I mean, if you say that there are categories of the relationship between language and culture, then what other categories exist? This might be just the wrong word, because there is no such thing. Speech etiquette is not a category of the relationship. That's why it's just logically not very correct. And I would work on revisiting this sentence. Then there is a comma, and we don't need this comma here because, well, absolutely not, because we cannot divide two verbs with a comma. In this article, we present and analyze. So there's only one subject, we, hence no comma. We present speech etiquette and analyze the rules of speech behavior during study of English and Chinese. This is also not quite right. During study of English and Chinese, whose study? Who is studying? And this part of the sentence, unfortunately, this fragment doesn't read very well. We analyze the rules of speech behavior during study of English. Who studies English? Where? In the classroom? In higher educational institutions. The relationships between ideas and words in this sentence are not very clear, unfortunately. This is why during study of English and Chinese, it reads like a direct translation. Let's move on. We have focused on the implementation of speech etiquette in both languages. I would ask myself what this means. And I'm asking myself what this means, actually. Can you implement speech etiquette? And do you mean that you have focused on teaching students speech etiquette? So as students acquire a foreign language, they acquire speech etiquette rules as well. Is that what is implied here? Because speech etiquette is something that already exists. You can learn it. I'm not sure you can implement it. You can learn it, you can acquire the rules, but we have focused on the implementation. Again, whose implementation and how? The relationship between ideas is not very obvious here. In both languages, I am sorry. Again, on identifying similarities and differences, we see a comma here, but there are only two concepts. We have focused on the implementation, on identifying. If this is what you want to say, then you need a conjunction here and, right? We have focused on the implementation and identification, so this is not a parallel structure. What you could do instead, you could have said, we have focused on implementing and identifying similarities and differences. Because this is not parallel structure, it is also not very easy to read and understand the relationships between these ideas, because the sentence is complex. On identifying similarities and differences in the process of mastering a foreign language by pupils of a catered school. I would also look up this word. I would say students of a catered school. Similarities and differences. When we talk about similarities and differences, we compare at least two things. These things are similar, there are similarities, and there are differences usually between two or more things. Therefore, the word process used here in the singular form, unfortunately, it's a grammatical error. We need to say in the processes, well, so that it makes sense logically at least. But I would also revisit the entire sentence. And you can ask yourself right now as you're looking at this, do you understand what is implied? The relevance of the work lies in the fact that with the increasing relevance to cultural communication, there is a need to know and implement certain speech strategies that lead to successful interaction. The first thing I would ask myself is, can relevance lie? The relevance of the work lies in the fact that, well, yes, kind of, but I would say the word importance, because relevance, it's relevant to what? Just for the sake of clarity, I would probably use the word importance. The importance lies in the fact that I wouldn't put a comma here. With the increasing relevance to cultural communication, there is a need, again, to know, and again, the word implement certain speech strategies that lead to successful interaction. Between who and who? Whose interaction are we talking about? This is one, and not very clear. What does it mean to implement speech strategies? Are we talking about speech strategies, or are we talking about speech behaviors? Because speech etiquette is rather in the category of behavior, but not a strategy. The author highlights the national and cultural specifics of speech etiquette in Chinese and English by comparing individual speech situations. Determines, again, so look at this. The author highlights, the author determines. We can never separate two verbs by a comma. We need to say, so the author highlights and determines the main features of their understanding. This is unfortunately, again, the direct translation. What does it mean, the features of their understanding? It makes very little sense, unfortunately. Let me show you how this abstract can sound, and let me know if you see and hear the differences. I see 4 elements in this text that can be improved. Number 1 is punctuation, number 2 is grammar, number 3 is sentence structure, number 4 is clarity. All these 4 elements can be improved, because if they are improved, we can hear the value of this idea and of this scientific work. I dared to rewrite this abstract in an attempt to make sense of it, at least for myself. I'm inviting you to look at this together with me. If you can spot a mistake, if you can suggest a better way of expressing this idea, let's work on this together. The work that I did here is I simply made sense of what I was looking at. I continuously practice this skill, making sense of information, and I think for anybody who writes a research paper and wants to put it out there for the world to see the value of their scientific research, I think it's very important to learn to deliver information in a way that it's understood. Let me read this out loud for you. Stop, whatever you're doing right now, just pause for a moment and listen and ask yourself, does it make sense? The article examines speech etiquette in the context of the relationship between language and culture, as well as analyzes how certain speech behaviors are taught to English and Chinese learners. We have focused on introducing speech etiquette in the classroom when teaching both languages to catered school students to identify similarities and differences in the language acquisition patterns. The importance of the research lies in the fact that successful intercultural communication today requires knowledge and confident practical application of certain speech behaviors in a foreign language. The author compares various speech situations to distinguish the national and the cultural specifics of speech etiquette in both English and Chinese, and to determine how well students understand them. You can pause the video right now, read the text one more time silently to yourself. Take a moment to look at it again and again. Ask yourself this question. Does it make sense to me? Does it make sense what this research paper is going to be about? I want to specifically pause and look at this first sentence one more time because I think it's the most important sentence in this abstract. This is what it used to be. In this article, we present speech etiquette as a category of the relationship between language and culture and analyze the rules. So basically it was saying we present speech etiquette as a category of the relationship between language and culture. I think they wanted to say that, at least that's how I understand it, that they wanted to present speech etiquette as something that belongs both to language and culture, and analyze, and this is what I didn't understand well enough, because I would have to ask the author, and analyze the rules of speech behavior during study. I don't understand, what is implied. I thought, since we're talking about catered school, I dared to suggest in the classroom, because that's my version, in the classroom. But to be honest, it's not very clear what we're talking about here. Are we talking about self-study? Are we talking about the classroom? Are we talking about adults or children? But later, yes, it's obvious from the context that we're talking about children and most probably the classroom. And analyze the rules of speech behavior during study. What speech behavior is implied? I'm not really sure. But this is how I understand it. I think they meant to say that they analyzed how certain speech behaviors are taught to English and Chinese learners. The problem here is that there is no verb that clarifies what actually happened and what they did in this research. There's only one verb, present, which doesn't really do a good job. And as I continued with this passage, with this abstract, I dared to introduce more verbs. You see, introduce in speech etiquette in the classroom. This is entirely missing here. There are a lot of nominalizations here. Implementation, the process of mastering a foreign language, the relevance, increasing relevant to cultural communication, national and cultural specifics, features of their understanding. There are a lot of nominalizations here, but I focused on bringing more verbs, more vibrant verbs to the text. And another thing that confused me here is this individual speech situations. I started thinking, I asked myself, what is an individual speech situation? A speech situation, to me, is a conversation, which means more than one individual is involved. I think a person meant to say that if we take a speech situation and look at it, a situation where many people are involved, because it only makes sense to apply speech etiquette and to examine speech etiquette if there are at least two people in a conversation. And individual is probably not the right adjective here, so I dared to replace it with the word various. Again, if you see a way to improve this abstract, please let me know. Let's continue line editing this passage together. The point that I'm trying to drive home is that direct translation does more harm than good. We don't learn a foreign language to translate words. We use the language to communicate ideas. And if you translate copy from one language to another, if you translate a website, if you translate a book, if you translate a research paper, it needs to say what it says in any language. It should not read like a bunch of words. So invest in your writing skills, invest in your cognitive abilities to make sense of information that comes in a foreign language. Invest in your metacognitive strategies, invest in your metalinguistic abilities so that you can switch between languages very fast and you can communicate important information easily without having to translate it word by word, because if you do so, it's so easy to lose the meaning and the gist of what you want to say. We want to invest, at least I want to invest in my ability to switch between different language codes very fast, to be able to apply my cognitive skills relative to English and my first language and another language that I speak very quickly, and to be able to discern what is what, to be able to know when I should apply which sentence structure. Because when I speak English, when I write in English, I don't do it for myself. My point and my goal is to make sure that native speakers of the English language understand my text and understand what I say. And if I want to build relationships with them, and as soon as you start communicating with them, you start building a relationship. If I want to get a response from that audience, if I want them to understand me, if I want to share something with the world, like here, look, you're sharing something important, it's a research paper, and you put it out there in English. So I would make sure that people can understand the value of your research by at least taking care of the translation. Again, let's continue line editing together, and if you see a better way to transform that abstract into something that makes more sense for native speakers, if you are a native speaker, please let me know what you think and if this revisited passage makes sense to you. Thank you very much for watching.